So we have here on Daf Ayin Hayamid Beis, Im Nishtayer Me'ator Afilu Kechut Asara Kosher. So who is considered one whose member is severed? Anyone whose member was cut off, however, if even a hair's breadth of the corona remained, then he is fit. He can come into the call. Yosef Ravina v'kami boile, and Ravina came in and he had a suffix, Malo chut me'atorah sha'amru, al pnei kula, o al pnei ruba. Did they mean that a hair's breadth must remain along the face of the entire corona or along the face of the majority of the corona? Is it sufficient that only a majority of the corona, the inner rim of the fleshy head, remain intact, and the person would thus remain fit, meaning he's royal lakal, even though part of the member beyond the corona towards the body is cut off? Or is it necessary that a hair's breadth must remain along the face of the entire corona? Amar le Rava Tosfa, that was his name, Le Ravina, in response to Ravina's suffix, Malo achut al pnei ruba klape reisha. A hair's breadth along the face of a majority of the corona is sufficient, but on the condition, klape reisha, that the remaining majority of the corona is on the upper side, klape reisha, rosh ha'torah, klape makom sha'torah govelas im hagid. Aval im chelek ha'torah asamach legid nechtach berubo, areu krus shivcha. Afilu im nishar me'atar kol hekif hagid b'tzida, amaruchak me'agid v'samach lekarka. So again, the remaining majority of the corona is on the upper side. The fleshy head of the member, the glands, and the atar, the corona, which is the raised border of the fleshy head, rest on a slant at the end of the member. Thus, the corona is closer to the body on the top of the member than it is on the underside. Amar Rav Huna. And we'll add the translation here. To the translation, we'll add the Masechet. He says, "Im nechtach v'nismait me ove hagid li arko v'chelek hagid shalamala me'atar v'al pia ama v'ofen shechelek hagid hakarov leguf ova ukechol shemisrach guf udak yoser v'yoser v'nasa hagid kekulmus achatuch ba'alakson kidei sheyehei v'katzeu chud lichtov bo chaticha kazuk shera." So Rav Huna says that if a man's member is cut diagonally, like the tip of a quill pen, he is fit to marry into the kohol. Now, there's a note here in the art scroll. I don't have a very good copy, unfortunately, so I'm going to see if I can make it out. First of all, he says that Rava Tosfa explains that the person is fit where the cut began below the corona, within the fleshy head, on the upper part of the member, and descended into the lower part of the corona, leaving intact a majority of the corona that slants towards the body, i.e., a hair's breadth of the upper part of the corona is intact. The part of the corona that is completely cut off is on the underside. If, however, the cut began on the upper side, above the corona, towards the body, in the member itself, and then continues towards the tip on a steep diagonal, so that the majority of the corona's circumference that remains intact is the part that runs along the entire lower part of the circumference, the person is rendered unfit. So again, what Rava is doing is he's saying that if the cut began below the corona, on the upper part of the organ, and descended into the lower part of the corona, so that means that it left intact the majority of the corona that slants towards the body. So the hair's breadth of the upper part of the corona is still intact. That's okay. But if the cut began on the upper side, not the lower part of the corona, but on the upper side, towards the body, and that's above the corona and then continues towards the tip on a steep diagonal, so the majority of the corona circumference that remains intact is the part that runs along the entire lower part of the circumference. That's the key, the lower part of the circumference. Then he's possible. And then we have the statement of Rav Huna that if the cut began on the upper part of the member, which we said is good, and thus the upper circumference of the corona was cut off and extended diagonally on the center to the center of the fleshy head, rather than to the underside of the head, the cut does not pass through the semen tube at a critical point, unlike the preceding case, where we said that according to Rav, it's klape reisha, but if it was hekef agid b'tzida meruchak me'agid samach lekarka, which we said on the upper side, but running along the lower part of the circumference, then he's possible. So that's Rav Huna's ke kulmus kshera. But if it's ke marzev, psula. Ke marzev is ketzinor hapasuach mitzido ha'elyon. And chakika zu psula. If the cut is like a gutter, he is unfit. If a deep and wide furrow was gouged down the middle of the member on its upper side, hence the two sides and the bottom part of the member that remain intact have the appearance of a gutter, the cut was only made in the upper part of the member and does not pass through the semen tube, so if the cut is like a gutter, he is unfit. And explaining this distinction, hai shalit be'avira, v'hai lo shalit be'avira. In the gutter-like cut, the air prevails, whereas in the case of the quill-like cut, the air does not prevail. See, he has here in the art scroll, he has 3 footnotes here. Page 28, 29, and 30. So footnote 28, we read earlier, the cut began on the upper part of the member above the corona. The upper surface of the corona was cut off, and the cut was extended diagonally to the center of the fleshy head rather than to the upper side of the head. I mean, we really need a diagram for this. Thus, the cut does not pass through the semen at a critical point. But if a deep and wide furrow was gouged down the middle of the member on its upper side, hence the 2 sides and the bottom part of the member that remain intact have the appearance of a gutter. So the cut was made in the upper part of the member, although the cut does not reach the bottom part of the male member and does not reach the semen tube and disrupt the flow of the semen. Cold air enters the member between the walls of the cut and prevents the semen from becoming potent. Rav Chizda Amar, Kimarzev Kshera, Kikulmus Psula, just the opposite. If it's cut like a gutter, he is fit to enter the congregation. If it's cut diagonally, like the tip of a quill pen, he is unfit. And what's the reason for this distinction? High Gorid. One second. High Gorid in the case of the gutter, like when the semen is drawn properly out of the body. A high low guard, whereas in the case of the quill-like cut, the semen is not drawn properly out of the body. He says here in note number 31, in the member itself, there's no place in the member for the air to be trapped, thus the semen remains warm and becomes potent. Since only the center of the member is missing, but its outside walls remain intact, all the sides of the member come in contact with the vaginal canal during cohabitation. Hence, the member is warmed and the sperm is ejaculated into the womb. Omar Rava, Kavase de Rav Huna Mistabra. Logic accords with Rav Huna in this matter, because indeed, high lo shalit be'avira, in the case of this one, the quill-like cut, the air does not prevail, the high shalit be'avira, whereas in the case of this one, the gutter-like cut, the air prevails. Imishum Gridusa, and as for Rav Chisda's argument regarding the proper drawing of the semen out of the body, Midi dihavi abarza de chavita. It is the same as occurs with the spigot of a barrel. Since the thickness of the member is missing at the top, there is no member at that point to come in contact with the vaginal canal. Hence, the member is not warmed, the ejaculation does not occur, rather sperm merely drips out. It cannot affect conception. A spigot is first thin and then widens. Thus, when it is inserted into the barrel's spigot hole, the front part does not come in contact with the walls of the hole. Only when it is completely inserted, at which point the spigot's thick part rests in the hole, does the spigot come in actual contact with the walls of the spigot hole. Similarly, when the member is cut like a quill, although the tip of the member does not come in contact with the walls of the vaginal canal, the back part of the member does come in contact with them. That is sufficient to warm the member and cause the sperm to be ejaculated into the womb. Amalei Ravina Limeremar. Hachi Amar Marzutra Mishmeder of Papa. So Ravina said to Meremar, thus said Marzutra in the name of Rav Papa, Hilchasa, Bein Kikumus Bein Kemarzef Kshera. The law is that whether it is cut like a quill pen or like a gutter, it is qualified, meaning the person who is injured is fit to marry into the congregation. However, he inquired whether this pertains to where the cut began below the corona, the fleshy head, or above the corona in the member itself. So Marzutra Rav Papa, it was uncertain to him as to whether the cut in the form of the tip of a quill pen or in the form of a gutter began on the top of the male member above the corona and extended through the corona, or whether the cut began below the corona, and as such, it did not cut through the corona. Pshita, to Lamala Me'atara, there was never a suffix, and it's obvious that the reference is to where the cut began above the corona in the member itself. So in that case, kosher. The Isal Kedaita, Lemata Me'aktora, kosher, if it were to enter your mind to say that the reference is to where the cut began below the corona in the fleshy head and continued downward towards the tip, is afilu nichras hagid namin. even if the member was severed entirely at that point, he would also be fit. Kimoshe Shaninu b'mishnasenu shedai lahachshiro b'kach shenishar me'atorah kechut hasara b'afilu shalamato mimokom ze neftach hakol. Even if the member was severed completely at that point, rather than merely like a quill or a gutter, he would be fit to marry. For we learned in that Mishnah that if a hair's breadth of the corona remains intact, he is fit to marry, even if the rest of the fleshy head was severed entirely. Ravina shehitzig is hadvarim lemeremar kilu yesh safek b'kach l'shabushe lemeremar hu devoy livdo ki meremar mechudad v'yada lahashiv al sheilas. Ravina was merely attempting to trick Meremar in order to test his acumen. Rav Papa Marzutra never made such an inquiry, for it is obvious that these rulings regarding the cut in the form of a quill pen or a gutter refer to where the cut began above the corona, closer to the body. Ravina reported this fictitious inquiry only in order to test Meremar's acumen to see if it would be sharp enough to realize that the inquiry was inherently flawed. Hahu uvda dahava. There was an incident in the city of Mata Machasya, the Adam Shegido Nechkak Kimarze, where a man's member was cut in the form of a gutter. Shalafi Rav Huna v'Rava who pasul milav l'kol, Umar barav Ashi shesavik Rav Huna Gatzalach Shiro love b'kol. Ulakach Shafye Mar barav Ashi b'kulmus v'achshere. Mar barav Ashi whittled down the flesh on both sides until the cut was like a quill pen, the akshri, and he permitted him to marry into the congregation. Ma'bar Rav Ashi held that the halacha accords with Rav Huna and Rava and therefore, Bekach Hichshir es oso adam lava bekol kidas Rav Huna. Okay, so now we have a Brisa Masechet Bechoros on Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis, that inside the Amma, inside the organ, remember there are two tzinoros, two pipes, so to speak. One is for urine, and the other for semen, for Shechvas Zara. And between them, there's what's called a Klipas Hashun. Hahu Uvda Dahavi B'Pumpadisa, story that took place Pumpadisa, with regard to a person is Tatim Gufsa to Shechvas Zera. So the opening to this tzinor that is designated in the body for Hotzah Shechvas Zera became clogged up, became sosun. And that what happens is that inside the gid, the member, notzar char, a hole between the two tzinoros, the apik, b'makom ktanin. And as a result, the person is, his shichvat zera is coming through the nekev, that hole of hotzas meraglaim. Savar Rab Bibi Barbai Lachshure. So Bibi thought that here he's not a patsua, he's not dach, he's not karus, and therefore he should be kosher a level of kol. Even though inside his gid there's a hole between the two tzinoros, Rab Bibi thought that chur is not considered a ptsia. And it doesn't prevent him from being able to father a child. That was the opinion of Rabbi Bibi Bar Abai. Amar Rav Papi. Rav Papi addresses Rabbi Bibi Bar Abai. He says, how could you be machshir? How did it occur to you to be machshir? V'chi mishum di asu. As it gives the asun, meaning atem. And here we turn to daf ayin vav and aleph mimuloi, from I guess a sad kind of a family, which is called Lala, and that's Mishpachas Eliah Cohen. So you're from the offsprings of Eliah Cohen, who was cursed that the children will die at a young age, as it says in Shmuel Aleph Perek Beis, called Marbis Beischa Yamusu Anoshim, is Amrisi Mili Mul Yasa. Therefore you say things that are, again, unfortunate, Dvarim Umlalim, that are not correct. Because even if the Shichvat Zara goes out b'mkoma from the designated place through that opening in the Kona Hazera, Mivashla, it gets cooked, so to speak. But in this case, where the neck of the Kona Zera is Sasum, and the Shechva Zera is going through the other pipeline, the other Kona, which is the Meiraglayim, through the nekev between the Knei Hazera and the Knei Meiraglayim, and then it goes out, Shalom Koma, it's not in its regular place, is Loma Vash. It cannot impregnate a woman. There would be no conception. So he's not royal holy, and therefore he's possible L'kol. So Mirza Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue here on Daf Ayin Vavam and Aleph with Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel about the case of Nikev Hagid Nekev Kadon V'Nistam. Thank you very much.